Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 241. I hope you're all having an incredible week in your real life. And as for crypto land, we've been experiencing wild swings in this market as per usual, although it has been a pretty typical Q4 so far. But it is in this month of November where we see some of the biggest moves regarding seasonality. It's definitely a month of extremes. Interestingly enough, so far here in this month of November, it has felt as extreme as April felt. And this post I shared here, titled Crypto Market Monthly Mirror, could potentially be revealing what's ahead for the rest of this month of November and into next month of December, capping off this year of 2025. And you'll see here in this post, I'm essentially comparing months, starting with this recent July here in 2025 and comparing it to the way the year 2024 ended in the month of December, where between July and August moving into September, it felt really bullish until the September month of confusion, which February essentially felt the same right after Trump's inauguration. And then we had the first major liquidation ritual happening into March 10th, just like we had the liquidation ritual last month on October 10th, followed by another retest of the lows, and for some projects an even deeper correction into early April, with April 6th through 9th being the worst of it. And here we are on November 9th today as I film this podcast, and we're seeing a similar market structure between these 2 months of October and November, as you can see here, when comparing them to March and April earlier this year. And this could mean that December would be mirroring the month of May, where in May we saw most altcoins move up straight into a full recovery from the tariff crash the month prior. Now, I know this is all theoretical, but so far it seems like the market maker is doing everything in their power to shake us out of this market, and it's during these moments where the crypto market is in extreme fear that we see reversals, especially after all the record-breaking liquidations that we've had recently. So as you can imagine, we have a lot to cover here today, so let's get into it. But quickly, before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer, or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the matrix. I myself am going with some cold brew hibiscus tea with some lime added to it. Really nice. Also, make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered the project in at least 3 months. And if it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or in the event that I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 total year of chart history here on TradingView, then you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin, and please include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes from the members here in our community, those top 4 projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill. So let's kick this one off today with something that just happened this morning. Here we are on Truth Social on the official @RealDonaldTrump account. Donald Trump made this post on Truth Social earlier today, and I'm going to quickly read it to you. Words of wisdom. He said, "People that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt." I'll read a little faster. 37 trillion, record investment in the USA, plants and factories going up all over the place, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high income people, will be paid to everyone. So essentially, he's saying stimulus checks could be coming soon. That's what this $2,000 tariff dividend essentially is. It's a stimulus check. And he's announcing this at the very end of the 45th week of the year, as you can see right here. Remember, he was the 45th president in his first term. And at the very end of his first term, there was stimulus checks given out during the C-19 scam, with the first and second round of direct payments from those stimulus injections happening within his presidency before handing off the baton to Biden. One of the greatest to ever do it. Anyway, and just like his first term had a market crash in his final year as president, here we are in his first year of his second term, at the beginning of his second term, and there was a market crash pretty much at the same time of year. It's a perfect mirror effect, as above, so below. And now here we have this stimulus check concept coming back again as well, making this year of 2020 and 2025 feel like they're running in parallel. And what was going on in 2020 during this same time of year regarding the crypto market? And this is where things start to get pretty interesting. Over here, we're looking at the Ethereum chart. Could actually go over to here real quick. And I hope you guys are doing amazing. Microphone check is good. This is the chart I was looking for because this is a major trend line that was in play. Support, 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 support breakdown, backtest rejection, and then this is major. A kickback, overextended, wash out all the over leveraged shorts, and a bull trap followed by a retest perfectly of a trend line that's been in play since June of 2022. And so far we are holding it and even bouncing from it. So we'll see how that plays out. But anyways, we'll get to that a little later. What I want to talk about with you here today is the way that Ethereum is trading this year versus 2020. So this big V-shaped crash is the C-19 scam, and then we have over here this V-shape crash and recovery is the tariff scam. These are very similar structures, and you're going to see that pretty much month by month, all the moves to here have been pretty much mimicking themselves. Of course, we're looking at different prices. Of course, that is clear and obvious. But I want to quickly run you through this now that we're here. Effectively, we had a pretty lackluster September into October, followed by a slight recovery into November, but still nothing major going on until effectively like the third week of November, moving into December of 2020. So we're approaching that time frame here on November 9th, 2025. This Ethereum chart is almost identical when you look at the C-19 crash in March of 2020 compared to the tariff crash in April of 2025. The recovery is the same as well. This recovery becomes noticeable in the month of May. Right there. Here's May. And then we even have this sideways June with a little bit of a bear trap right there. So we have this sideways June right there before we get to July and then lift off. And then here we have getting to the month of July and lift off, pretty much going up all through the month of July and into the month of August, with spikes up in August and September all over here. All over here. You can see that right there in the very beginning of September. And then this all follows up with a dramatic washout, a liquidation ritual at the very end of Q3, transitioning into Q4. And let me quickly show you from this spike up to the lows about how much of a correction that was. It's like 34% from the current high over here to where we are now. It's even a little deeper, got about 37%. But consider we were at a lower zone, if you will, compared to where we are today. Here we were barely close to the prior all-time highs, as opposed to we recently tapped on the prior all-time highs. So consider that, of course, when we have these deeper corrections later stage in the cycle. And plus, this was a way more devastating crash and a lot more nervousness going on in the world because the world was locked down. It's a very different environment in that way as well. And the stimulus check started printing like here. I think it was April 20th. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, or if I'm inaccurate, but I believe it was like April 20th or so when they started giving out stimulus checks. And what happened after was history, right? Now, here we are, and the talk of stimulus checks is coming back. We also have the end of QT in the beginning of December, and then also we have a follow up with the FOMC, I believe around the first week of December. Let me check into that. I believe it's about the 6th or so of December. Anyways, we'll touch on that at another time. But also, we have this like looming government reopening. So there's a couple of things that are like all coming together at once. And this could be a very clear bear trap, what we're experiencing right now. And it's also becoming quite noticeable on socials across YouTube, crypto, Twitter, and many other places that a lot of people are believing this is it, that it's over. Now, they could be right, of course. Here we're in a coin toss between down and up. That's just the reality of things. But what's really fascinating is how it's had all this drama this whole year. And ultimately, the top projects have been looking really, really solid. And there has been no actual break of structure in those top projects. I mean, look at this Ethereum chart. It's pretty clear that this is nothing new for us to have a 30 to 40% correction in the midst of a cycle. Go back to Bitcoin in 2017, it had 30 to 40% corrections like 8 or 9 times on its way up. This is crypto. It's what it does. So now getting back to this, so far, what I just reviewed with you for all of 2020 moving into 2021, it's pretty much exactly going that way right now. And when we look back at December of 2020, right over here, pushing up into January of 2021, it wasn't really until after New Year's, which is right here. It wasn't really until after New Year's where things started to really go parabolic for the altcoin market. For a better understanding of what happened from New Year's of 2021, which is right here, to this peak over here, which was effectively around the February new moon, we can see that Ethereum went up around 180% in less than 2 months. But if you measure off the lows in the first week of November, keep in mind we're pretty much in alignment with that same exact time frame right now. We're going to go from over here. We just moved through the week of November 4th, and we measure it to that same top. You're going to see that we're approaching over 400% gains. And if you waited to buy perfectly at this February full moon bottom, I'll quickly show you for those that are wondering. There's your February full moon. If you bought perfectly at that February full moon bottom and sold perfectly at this top over here in May of 2021, let me quickly show you what that play would have been like. Yep, a little over 200%. You could have nailed it. But the odds are most people missed out on that whole move because of how they felt back here. That is very interesting and very important to know. And I was there, I was documenting it, I saw it for myself. The relationship between sentiment over here in October, November of 2020 during the C19 times versus what happened after February, after January, effectively in 2021. Different vibes. And the FOMO really started to kick in around these times. So a lot of people were trying to get fancy after the end of the year pump and effectively bought the top in February because they were FOMOing. Now, I'm not personally convinced that Ethereum has another 450% ahead, since my personal target for Ethereum is between 14,000 and 15,000 for this cycle, and I'm leaning more towards the 14K territory if I had to be exact. And if we measured from 450% off this week's lows, you can see where we would get to. And that's taking us towards almost, let's call it 17K. That is higher than what I'm anticipating. So I'm not really entertaining anything higher than 15K at this time, but of course, I'd love to be proven wrong with an even higher price target. Because the higher ETH goes, the higher all of my bags go. So send it Vitalik, please. Anyways, jokes aside, this setup does look very similar to late 2020, where effectively we had not necessarily on this ETH chart, but we have a spring, like a really dramatic washout that is taking some time, but then we recover just as fast as we crashed. And then once we get above the prior highs, we then have this backup phase. So this is called an SOS, a sign of strength, and this is your backup. So let's zoom out and let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go to like a 3-day chart, just gives us more screen real estate. I'm going to hide everything, and I'm going to show you this is your spring, this is your test, this is your spring, this is your test, this is your SOS where you go higher than where you were right before the crash, and then after you go higher than where you were before the crash, you have this dramatic pullback, and this is where everyone starts saying it's over. Trust me, that's how it went in September, October of 2020. I remember it vividly. And then remember all the flare airdrop shit started happening, XRP started breaking out, blah, 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 right? So it was during this time where I remember like everything was at some of the best prices you could have gotten before, well, besides the C19 crash itself. And lately we're seeing some altcoins go so low, like unbelievably low. And then we've recently also seen some of those same altcoins go up 50 to 100% in one single trading day. That's kind of like the stuff that happens right before we enter the last phase of the cycle. So getting back to this setup does look very similar to how it looked in late 2020 moving into 2021, especially considering how bad so many alts looked back then after the C19 crash, while the top projects looked solid at the time, all things considered. And that's also exactly how things are going now. And the February new moon that I referenced for early 2021, well, the upcoming February new moon is not only Chinese New Year, the year of the horse, but it's also an annular solar eclipse, making the last day of the year of the snake, February 16th. Let me quickly show you that. February 16th, the last day of the year of the snake, is the 47th day of the year. And there's that powerful 47 code that we've been focusing on all year since Trump this year became the 47th president of the United States into the year of the snake. And especially since his tariff policies crashed the markets into the date of April 7th, the 4-7 date. This 47 code is everything, which brings us to the next part of today's decode, which is this upcoming Friday, November 14th. Because this upcoming Friday, November 14th, is the day leaving 47 days in this year. And the following week, starting on the 17th of November, will be the 47th week of the year. And since the government is still shut down, at least since the last time I checked, and of course, as of recording this video, you never know what could happen between now and you watching this podcast. But as of today, Sunday, November 9th, I believe it's still shut down. Let me quickly refresh this page, and here it is. We are now on day 40. This made me want to check when would the 47th day of this shutdown be. So let's measure from October 1st. Got 10/1/2025, and then we have 11/17. 2025. Meaning, if you hit day 47 of this government shutdown, it lands at the start of the 47th week of the year. That's right. You literally cannot make this up. Just like the number 47 is the 15th prime number, and the date of April 7th, the crash, was the start of the 15th week of the year. We have a perfect synchronicity. And it's funny how this relationship between this dramatic washout in early April is also happening here in early November. It's making me feel there's a lot of synchronicity between these months. And again, this is why I'm putting so much emphasis on this 47 code. And here we have it. Now, I'm not saying it will go to day 47, but at this rate, high probability. High probability. So we'll see how it goes. Again, I'm not really gambling too much on this, nor do I give too much of a shit about this. If it ends soon, great. If it ends later, who cares? It's all just kind of like a big piranha harvest. So whatever. But of course, people ask me my feelings and my thoughts about it, etc. We're playing with the decodes, but I'm never going to give all my energy into decoding such a thing because I understand it's all like a play. It's like the Royal Rumble. It's entertainment, guys. It's not really as crucial as, but I will say, for those that are impacted by this, if you're a government employee or whatever's going on, if that's the case, of course that does suck a lot. But if anything, what that should motivate you to do is to become more self-reliant. Learn how to generate cash flow. This is everything in the new world that we're moving into, with humanoid robots, with artificial intelligence becoming nearly pretty much perfect at this point when it comes to videos, when it comes to voice. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable at this time how advanced AI is. It's getting scary. So again, really big motivator for me to do everything that I'm doing over with Waters Above University. We have something really exciting coming in 2026. I won't say anymore. Keep it. Shh. But anyways, getting back to this. Number 47 code, absolutely mind-blowing. So the potential 47th day of the government shutdown would land at the start of the 47th week of the year. Absolutely wild. And for those who've been keeping up on my decodes, you probably remember the other key connection I revealed to the date of November 17th. And that's connecting it to April 7th, the 4-7 date, because they are 225 days apart, and that is the code of the year that we're in, 2025. You remove the 0 using the rules of numerology, and 2025 becomes 225. These two dates, April 7th, the 4-7 code, and 11/17, the 47th week of the year, in the same year, 225 days apart, we're in the year 2025. So the last major connection I revealed for the upcoming 47th week of the year is the connection between Satoshi Nakamoto's birthday on April 5th, a couple days prior, and this is going to be very interesting. I don't know when the last time I talked about this was. I'd assume it might have been like a month ago, but it's the connection to November 19th, the upcoming full moon in November, in this month. New moon in Scorpio, I believe. Anyways, this was a connection that I probably shared at least a month or two ago, and it has to do with Satoshi Nakamoto, this mythological archetype's birthday being on April 5th, and this was a 50th birthday for this, what are we going to call it? Secret agency? So that was the 50th birthday of this this thing, and when you connect it to November 19th, they are 229 days apart. 229 is the 50th prime number. So we have 50 years old, 50th prime number, and also this is happening during the year of the snake, and snake in Gematria is 50. How crazy is that? And also, we can't forget how November 19th also will leave 42 days left in the year, as you can see right there. And that's one of the main codes tied to the gematria of Satoshi Nakamoto, giving us the 181 code, and 181 being the 42nd prime number. Also, Saturn is Satoshi and Saturn is 42 in gematria. And from November 14th, this would be the day leaving 47 days left in the year. Connecting it to Christmas, we have the 25th of December will be 42 days. And why this is important is because this holiday, Christmas, was originally Saturnalia, dedicated to the god Saturn that we were just talking about. And we have from November 17th, the start of the 47th week of the year, including this end date tied to December 23rd, which is the last day of Saturnalia. And there you have 37 days, which ties back to Trump's post right here on Truth Social regarding the tariff dividend and how his tariff policies will allegedly pay down the $37 trillion debt that they have. Now, this is a very important code. By the way, this is not an accurate number. They're just fucking with us, okay? This 37 code, you say it out loud by the numbers. You have 3 sevens. 777 is the jackpot number. That becomes 21. That is Saturn 21. They are flexing on us. These numbers don't matter. It's just code that they use to communicate with each other. Here you're learning what that code all means. So this is a game to them. They don't care. They don't care who's losing their jobs or not. They don't care who's getting laid off. They don't care who's going to be replaced by AI. They don't care about the humanoid robots coming. They don't care about any. They don't care. They are here to do one thing and one thing only, which is use everybody that's alive right now for their life force energy. And the easiest way to do that to everybody is to make them believe that what the government is doing matters. It's for you to believe in politicians, for you to believe in them having power, because you don't believe in the power inside of yourself. So it's time for us to wake up to this and tap back into that power within us so you can govern yourself. Remember, government, governare mente, mentis, it means mind control. How can you trust anybody that represents an institution which represents mind control? It's time to wake up. So, just a side note, all in all, I want us to focus on the date range specifically of the 17th through the 19th of November within the 47th week of this year. And one last significant thing to mention about this time frame is that November 19th, as I kind of hinted to earlier, it will be a new moon. A new moon in Scorpio, I believe, on November 19th or 20th, depending on what you look at. So keep that in mind, especially since we just had a local bottom so far on the recent full moon. So it's a common pattern actually throughout the end of 2020 into 2021. Perhaps some of you remember this because that's kind of when my channel got going and when it started to get a little bit more popular, and that's where the moon cycle stuff all came from. So let me quickly just show you. I'm looking at the daily chart for Bitcoin. We're going to go back to the 2020 to 2021 timeframe. You can see very dramatic moves up and down, and it was all in relation to the moon cycles. So I'm going to hide this, and I'm only going to look at the moons now that I've been thinking about this. We have over here this full moon correction into November. That's the month we're in now. We pop up here in December. We actually just shot through all of this and topped on the new moon of January. Then we corrected into the full moon of January. Then we moved up into around the new moon of February. Then we corrected into the full moon in February. Then we moved up again into the new moon of March, down into the full moon of March, up until the new moon of April, down into the full moon of April, and then up again into the new moon of May. And then we had a eclipse. And this was again concluded by a bottoming structure on all of the next 3 full moons. Then you can see a clear recovery into exactly the new moon of September, a correction into the full moon of September, and then the cycle topped around the new moon of November, followed by an eclipse, which started the bear market. And then here we have a bottom on an eclipse, which started the new bull run. And this is not the most perfect month-to-month tool that you could use. Of course, there's a couple of other things. Lately, I've been noticing that some full moons are very bullish, actually, while some new moons aren't. Some are more muted, and there's also other elements at play with astrology, like Mercury, like Uranus, like Saturn. There's a lot more complexity that, of course, we can add in, like is Saturn retrograde, is Venus retrograde, and we could go deeper for sure. But back in 2020 into 2021, during that whole time frame, it was a powerful relationship between the full and the new moons. And I'm wondering now that we've had this notable correction into this November full moon, which we've also had in other examples, of course, but is this meaning that we're going to start having that same relationship with the moons like we did at the end of 2020 moving into 2021, where you just saw we do have that full moon correction, a lull, then we push up through the new moon, following all of this into January new moon, and then we stall out, pull back into the January full moon. So for those that want to know, the January new moon will be on the 18th. Anybody interested in anything that's going on the 18th of January? Keep that in mind. Obviously, the following month would be Chinese New Year. So I'm really interested in what the setup is for this time frame, especially because we'll have, by that has come and gone, we'll have Mercury will no longer be retrograde, we'll have Saturn will no longer be retrograde, and I think Uranus will still be retrograde until this time frame. I'll have to check back in with that. It's a lot of things to cover here, especially with what I'm doing with my TA and all things, and also my university, etc. So I try my best to keep tabs on all of this stuff, but obviously there's a lot to keep tabs on. Needless to say, it's feeling like we're shifting in energy. And since I brought up Saturn a little bit ago and I've started hinting towards it, this is actually the perfect opportunity to revisit the Saturn retrograde analysis, especially since the pattern that I revealed last year, in this fractal over there, especially because the pattern I revealed last year preparing for late October in 2024 played out exactly how we anticipated. I even had a video posted, a short, which I don't normally do shorts, but I had a short that was posted and it mentioned the quote, last 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde. Some of you might remember. But anyways, we had a pattern that I revealed last year, preparing for late October. It played out how we anticipated with a pivot and a breakout during the final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde. Perhaps some of you remember those Red Pill podcasts a little over a year ago when I started keeping track of the influence Saturn retrograde has on the crypto market. So let's quickly review this chart, starting with what I mentioned just a moment ago, and that's a pattern for the final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde, which, by the way, you can see this green line across the screen. We are now moving into that time frame. That's why I want to cover it with you here today. And we still have about 3 more weeks ahead until Saturn begins to station direct again. But anyways, I want to admit this right now, not really an admission, but more a disclaimer. What we're about to review is by no means a science. There's also not really enough data to make any conclusions. And lastly, I personally held off on exploring this whole Saturn retrograde thing until I had like 10 astrologers begging me to look into it. So that's what we're working with here. I'm just being honest. So I took the time last year to mark off about 10 iterations of Saturn retrograde. Recently, I've covered all of them going all the way back to 2013, which was the last year of the snake on the Bitcoin chart. And I found enough examples of this particular pattern playing out to convince me that it was worth sharing with our mastermind community here. So I did so. And the rest is history. But I just wanted to lay out that disclaimer because I know some of this astrology stuff is a little too woo for some people, and I get it, trust me. But there's definitely something here with what I'm about to review with you that's worth paying attention to, in my opinion. So let's quickly review, starting with last year. And again, we kind of want to focus on the major pivot. We're going back about 21 days or so, and you're going to see what Bitcoin starts to do after that. So we have final 3 weeks kicking off here, moving up, and then extending a little higher, but not much. Let's see how many days we got. We got pretty much a calendar month after. Then we're going to go to this iteration here, and we're going to see when we go back 3 weeks. Would you look at that? That's 3 weeks right there. Boom. And then we start going up. And then after we have about another, damn, look at that. Literally another calendar month of moving up. This time we went a little sideways. We did have a kind of like a micro UTAD up thrust after, but it wasn't an actual distribution. It's just a bull trap with a pump. But we remember this, at least some of us do. This was the launch of the first official Bitcoin ETF. It was right here. And then there was obviously this sell the news sort of vibe, and then it followed with a bear trap, because when I zoom out, Bitcoin went on a hell of a rally. But this was the final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde, effectively right there. And then we had about a month of up afterwards. Here we had final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde, and then about a month up, afterwards. Now let's go back. Now here we're going to get something different. You can see that we were just chopping really sideways. We did have a little bit up afterwards, but then we had a low. That was the market bottom though. And I want you to take note of this, because after we get out of these quote unquote Saturn retrogrades during a bearish time, like this was already near the bottom of a bear market, where this red box is all of the Saturn retrogrades, by the way. When we got through this shit, we quickly crashed down, but like best time in history to buy Bitcoin. Let's see how many days it took. A calendar month, man. Fucking unbelievable. So if you bought 1 month after, you got in at probably the best price ever. And that's the same thing with selling a month after. Like, still a pretty amazing move instead of getting caught up in this fucking drama right here. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, let's continue. We have, again, final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde. This one you can see we were crashing into about day 19, but remember this was also a full moon, literally on the day. So there's again a couple elements. We could dial in the timing more, but still the final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde were higher highs, bullish, and then we also continued up, holy shit, for about 1 calendar month after. That is where it gets dangerous. So it's clear to me that there's a relationship between 1 month after. I mean, I don't remember exactly how long it takes for Saturn to start stationing direct again, nor does it really matter too much to me. But anyways, I'm trying to prevent going so deep in the trenches with the astrology stuff, because I know that there's a lot to take in here on my channel. There's gematria, there's numerology decoding, there's all this other stuff we're talking about. And then on top of that, there's TA, you know? I don't want to overwhelm people. I want to keep things simple, and I hope and I believe many of you appreciate that. But just getting back to the point that got about 3 months of up, or 3 weeks of up at the end, and then about 1 month of up, and then GTFO, because this led to an absolutely devastating market crash. Now over here, not the craziest move up in the world, but if you bought that 21st day, you were at the low. You were at the low. before this thing rampaged up. So let's see, 1 month after, we still had a lot of up. But you can see it's right around that 1 month time that we're clearing wherever we were prior. So this is making me feel that 1 month after we station direct, that's about where Bitcoin should be topping out. Ooh, that would be like New Year's. That would be right there at the end of the year. It'd be a very weird time to top out, but we see that at the end of December, Bitcoin's doing pretty damn good. That's the end of December right there. Like, sure, we went a little bit higher, but Bitcoin's doing pretty fucking good. For the year, it's at a new high. So fascinating. Anyways, we can see also here is one of those we dumped situations. So this is a clear anomaly. But the one thing I will say about all of this is right here, and for those that know my solar and lunar cycle stuff, right there we did have the start of a new solar cycle. So bottomed, and then we just raged up into the following solar eclipse, which is fascinating because it's making me sort of feel like altcoins will actually do something similar into the upcoming annular solar eclipse. But then there could be this weirdness around February, March, kind of the same way there was in April into May of 2021. Okay, where we saw a lot of positive stuff coming out. A lot of sell the news type vibes. I mean, I think even like Elon went on SNL and shilled Dogecoin, and it was the exact top. Now, we haven't had a thing like that for Doge or pretty much anything in the crypto market in a very long time. I mean, Trump does come out once in a while and say some things, but nothing as epic as those times in 2021. Now, getting back to this is another iteration where if we see in these final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde, even though it did go lower following, it was up during the last 3 weeks. Here we have, this was the last 3 weeks up, and then afterwards, a little bit of chop. Not the clearest pattern in the world, but then of course we did go higher into the December new moon, as you can see right there. Here, this is actually very similar to the example at the bottom over here, where although we were in a bearish structure, you can see that it was some of the best buying opportunities around the end of that Saturn retrograde. Here, this was also some of the best buying opportunities at the end of that Saturn retrograde. This would have been tough. This would have been tough for sure. For sure. This is why you can't rely solely on this one thing, and this is why I don't. So here you have, again, moving up, but then the absolute lows coming in. Let's see if it's 1 month, almost 23 days. You would have bought the best fucking price ever. You would have got in at $200 Bitcoin. Imagine you bought Bitcoin at $200. You would be up right now 50,000%. Unbelievable. And then here as well, if you bought the end of this Saturn retrograde, you would have had 1,500% gains ahead into also, let me double check, the December new moon. Okay, so this is very interesting. And as I prefaced, this is not a 100% success rate kind of thing, but there's definitely a clear pattern when Bitcoin is in a bull run and holding its bullish structure in the macro, which so far Bitcoin is. That is the case today, and as I record this Red Pill podcast at least, with Bitcoin currently holding above 100K and just last month hitting a new all-time high, pushing higher than the previous all-time high in January 2025 at the start of the year, which was also right after a Saturn retrograde. That was also what happened in 2023. and in 2021 and 2020 and 2017. And in 2016, even though there was a notable correction at the end of Saturn retrograde, once Saturn started stationing direct again, that market bottomed. And the same goes for 2013, the last year of the snake. So if we were to have boring and down and negative feeling price action, it could very well be wrapped up by the month of November. And I remember here, we were also seeing a lot of altcoins, not Bitcoin, but altcoins in November, while Bitcoin dominance was going higher through November and December of 2020, heading into 2021. November wasn't the best month for altcoins. November wasn't the best month for altcoins over here. And also last year, November wasn't the best month for altcoins either, because Bitcoin was continuing to get more and more dominant during those times. What we're waiting for now is for Bitcoin dominance to break down. So, all in all, there is, of course, an interesting relationship between the Bitcoin price and when Saturn is stationed retrograde, and with Bitcoin recently experiencing a 20% correction with a daily RSI heading towards being clearly oversold, and with the crypto market sentiment in extreme fear. And just a month ago, we experienced the largest liquidation ritual in the history of this asset class, with peak fear across the board, way worse than this FTX crash. These are all signs that this is likely a late stage shakeout before the final breakout of the cycle. And that's specific to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been in price discovery for some time now. It is about to experience, in my opinion, the final breakout. I don't see a crazy run for Bitcoin all the way into Q4 of next year. I mean, unless we have a wild black swan event in 2026 that brings Bitcoin down to like 50K. If Bitcoin was to crash back to 50K, then sure, I could assume late 2026 to be awesome, just because it's kind of that rip the band-aid off type vibe with Bitcoin. But I don't know if Bitcoin's going to do that kind of stuff anymore. Again, just consider that from where we are recently, 120K down to 50K is about a 59% correction. All right. That would be a pretty brutal move. And if altcoins already look as shitty as they do, imagine Bitcoin having a 50% correction from here. So this is why I'm not entertaining that anymore. And I think Bitcoin's only going to have 30 to 40% corrections max for the rest of its existence. It will only be 30 to 40%. And this is why I think we have one more rally ahead, maybe into the 140, 150, maybe 160 territory max. And then we get hit with a 30 to 40% pullback. And then we go up again, and then another 30, 40% pullback. And then we go up again, and it'll just keep stair stepping and stair stepping. Very similar to the way that the Apple or the Microsoft chart or the Amazon chart looked after the dot-com bubble, where this was the popping of the dot-com bubble for Bitcoin, but you could see that all the altcoins, some of them are lower than where Bitcoin was back in December 2022. Some of them are lower than where they were in the C19 crash. So I hope you see where I'm coming from. Bitcoin has already recovered off the quote-unquote dot-com bubble, and now it's just having 20 to 30% corrections. And then eventually, sure, we'll have a more extreme move up and then a more extreme correction. But the 50% plus corrections on Bitcoin, it's hard for me to entertain that at this time. Again, it would be more likely that in this current environment that we have one final more move up. Our alt season, it sucks even saying that term, but let's just say Bitcoin dominance breaking down and that liquidity flooding into some of these altcoins. And of course, we'll reassess as that goes. So with that being said, let's jump into these charts to review the setup into the week ahead. I actually want to quickly start with the Mercury retrograde chart we reviewed last week, just to recap that, since I just covered the Saturn retrograde analysis moments ago, and adding the Mercury retrograde analysis here, I believe, will balance that out. So let's quickly recap that chart, and then I'll move over to a quick review of the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, as well as gold, to just get a broad overview of the markets before moving into the altcoins. And then we just had a weekly close come in. Bitcoin did close above 104K. That's great to see. Also, you can see structurally, we had Bitcoin closing back above these resistance levels somewhere around the same price. And then I would assume there must be a CME gap. Yay. So let's get that filled now. Probably while I'm recording this, that'd be better than it not. And then we could keep this show moving. Okay, but let's do what we promised and quickly look at the Mercury retrograde chart. Now we're working with our first daily close at the start of Mercury retrograde. This is what I teach you guys. So what we're going to want to do now is adjust this, and there's a method to the madness. So I'm going to adjust this right here, because whenever there's the first daily close of Mercury retrograde, we want to know where that price is so that we can expect that price in the case that we have a sideways Mercury retrograde. And we're talking to this date. It would actually make more sense to just put it here. All right. So now, the way these usually go is that we actually move up for about the first 5 to 7 days of Mercury retrograde. And then we have a fake out. So it's like a pump and dump. And then after that, depending on where we go, we come back to this price, up or down. So in the event that this stretches lower, or it just only comes back to the support and then it kind of just chops here, and then we usually close off sideways at the end of Mercury retrograde. But the final Mercury retrograde of the year does tend to be more bullish, usually. So that's why we've marked this one off, and then we have that orange line up there to just show by the halfway point moving into phase 2, that would be the make or break. We have over here bullish Mercury retrograde in Q4. We have over here bullish Mercury retrograde in Q4. Here we have a bullish Mercury retrograde in Q4. Here we have the end of the cycle, bullish Mercury retrograde in Q4. There is so many examples of these, so it's very important to consider. We've had many times a lot of chop, but still up during Mercury retrograde. So this is something I'm considering. Also, the fact that we had this correction into the start of Mercury retrograde, that is not weird. That's actually pretty typical. You can see right there a correction into Mercury retrograde over here, a correction into Mercury retrograde over here, the same, over here, the same, over here, the same. That's Venus retrograde. Over here, the same. So it's very normal for Bitcoin to have a correction into the first 48 hours of Mercury station retrograde. And we're about to leave that pretty much tomorrow. So the first couple days could be weird, but days 5 to 7, we're known to have a little bit of a pump and dump. So it could go something like this in a bullish case. And the one that I'm paying the most attention to is right here at the end of 2021. Because we just have a similar setup with Saturn retrograde in the final 3 weeks right there on this day, and then the final Mercury retrograde. So keep in mind that we pretty much 48 hours, 72 hours into the shadow phase is when we topped, and this was something we did here too. This is like Trump's leading into the inauguration. So we had Trump's victory right there. Pumped, final Mercury retrograde of the year, and then we topped in the shadow phase, about 48 hours. And that'd be perfect timing in my opinion. Right there at the end of November. Anyways, we'll keep an eye on this, but these are the phases. Let's now look at how that weekly close went. So oh, this chart's messed up. Apologies. So you can see we have this double top over here, and we have Bitcoin has come back perfectly to that level. We have a weekly close on the top of that level. And let's see where these major moving averages are. So, okay, we have closed below the 34 EMA, which is not great to see, but this is what we've seen in all of the extreme environments for Bitcoin. And any candle that closes below the 34 weekly, it's usually on that candle that we have the best prices to buy at. So we can see that right there. We could see that right there. And then, of course, we just got that recently. And now everybody and their mother is talking about the 50 simple moving average, the 50 MA. It's starting to become a meme. Now, since I started my channel 4 years ago, I use the 55 SMA. So I use the 8 and the 55 as their Fibonacci numbers, so I prefer them. Now, we have had a tap on the same level at every extreme so far this bull run, and we have yet to close below that major moving average during this bull run. And the last time that we did close below it, it was very elusive because you can see we were holding it for like 4 or 5 weekly closes, and then we finally broke down. And when we broke down, we had this really deep correction below it, like an additional 20%. So we'll see a total 50% correction followed by a buyback into the 55 SMA, and then we were rejected on it. So the idea would be, okay, well, if this right here is this right here, then we could potentially come all the way back to around 78 or 80K Bitcoin, and then come back up to the 55 simple moving average, get rejected off of 101K, and then that would be the end of the cycle. Something like this. Not the best chart to try to do this on. So we have right there, then we have this move, coming back into that moving average, whoop, getting rejected, and then that would be lights out. Same thing that happened right here. But I am not entertaining that right now because of what Bitcoin dominance has yet to do. So let's actually check in with the S&P just fast. I know this is looking crazy right now. Got another wild rejection on this major level, but we are holding the 8 simple moving average on the weekly chart. And then also at the same time, we're having gold backtest the 8 simple moving average on the weekly chart, and it's been holding that as a key support. So remember what I was saying about gold, how I would not be shocked if we have a little bit of a move up followed by a lower high rejection, and then into late November, into December, we start going down again with this zone over here of interest, which could take some time. I mean, it could literally take all the way until around May through, let's call it June, heading into the August eclipse. And just remember, gold takes time. This is the rarest pump in the history. Like, in most people who are watching this, your lives, that's how rare this move is. It is unbelievable to see this type of parabolic advance for gold, okay? So when we zoom out, there's not too many instances of this in price discovery, by the way. Go to like a monthly. It's a lot of noise. So right here, we had something similar happen during the 08 crisis. Here we had this happen in 76. And let's see where the RSI is. So you see where my cursor is? That's around 92 RSI over here in 1980 and over here in 1973. So this is very rare. This is very, very rare to see such a move. And this initial top was back in 2011. Yes, we hit new all-time highs. Yes, we hit a couple new all-time highs, but it was up until this This moment here, pretty much March 2024, before the oh man, I'm trying to remember what major eclipse this was, but needless to say, that was when this thing started going crazy, and it's been 100% up since for 550 days. You know, it's a pretty epic rally, and a lot of it started to come in just this time frame between August and October. That alone was a move of 30 plus percent. It's a big, big move for gold. Lots of market cap. I mean, I wouldn't even be shocked if the total market cap of crypto was added to gold's market cap in like a couple of weeks. It's very extreme. So, a little bit of a bounce on gold right now, up to like 4,100, would actually be very bullish for crypto, in my opinion, given where we're at, like the totality of things. And then Bitcoin dominance, we have to realize, has been holding a channel, which I believe it's starting to show a little bit of weakness as it's rising. And this is time for there to be a breakdown after this. Don't call it double top, but micro double top. Once it got to that almost 61%, a little bit above 61%, harsh rejection. And then now we're coming back to the support zone after that harsh rejection. We're going to have to see how that plays out. But I think below 59.5%, this thing should start draining down back to 58% again. And it could happen a lot quicker than it's been rising because it's been holding strong for a long time now. So just keep that in mind. Quickly look at others. We were talking about this recently too. This major breakdown and back test of the 236. Got the back test of the 236 there and here and going below it. But then there's an explosive move to follow and we gravitate back to this major support line. So I'm anticipating that as well. And this would actually be getting us to around the 702 fib somewhere, let's just say in the month of December would be sensible for the timing. And this isn't the cleanest, it's probably cleaner to go there. Sorry, I can't see with this in the way. So yeah, right around the 702. And that's a very important level because that's where this thing rallied to as well. And it started to get a lot of chop, but there was a ton of momentum to the upside. And then ultimately, of course, if we could get the main entire move played out up to this 1618, slightly below it, that would be hitting into this resistance line. So we had one rejection here, one rejection there. And if we kept following that, it would perfectly be at this 1618 around 620 billion for others. That'd be a major move, guys. So going to be keeping my eye on that as long as we're following this pattern. And when I take everything off and we just zoom out, this does look like an epic head and shoulders potential. Of course, can't deny that. But I've seen these setups before where everyone starts talking about the same setup and then the market maker does the opposite. It's kind of like what's going on right now with the 50 weekly moving average. Everyone's talking about it. The market maker knows because they're using AI to take in all of our data. It's kind of like interesting. Like I stopped making a lot of YouTube videos and I'm feeling like that's almost safer. Like, because I know for a fact all throughout the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a lot of stuff that I started talking about and then it became popular. And it's almost best that it just stays in this like little like niche area of the interweb. You feel me? But anyways, I can sense that a lot of people are starting to get anxious and starting to get very bearish because a lot of these patterns and, these things are becoming mainstream, man. So yes, it's a very ugly head and shoulders potential, but we've seen these things get invalidated real fast. And then the moment they start getting invalidated, the same people that were calling it a head and shoulders start calling it an inverse head and shoulders. They can't make up their fucking mind. So whatever, I don't get too lost in the sauce of those patterns. It's never really the safest thing to do, especially with altcoins. With Forex and with traditional stocks, it's a lot easier to pattern trade for sure. But this world is a lot different. And plus, it could be on track for exactly what you're anticipating regarding the pattern. And then there's still a liquidation event, or there's still just a FOMO pump that could come out of nowhere from a single tweet. So that's what we're working with here. Let me quickly check in on the Bitcoin chart on like the daily, because I just want to see a couple things. Also want to see where the moving averages are. Okay. All moving averages have moved into a bullish posture or in a bearish posture on the daily, so that's definitely concerning. But the one thing is we've clearly double tapped at the same exact level of around 100K on the nose. And what we can see here is just recovering the 21 EMA, in my opinion, will start to coil all of these major moving averages together, and then getting back above the 55 is everything. So when you can get back above this white moving average, by then, I think we're going to start to see some momentum pushing to the upside, and this will look at the end of the day like a selling climax, although a lot of people are probably looking at this with Wyckoff and calling this a UTAD, which again, I've seen those patterns become invalidated, especially when we're in this type of market where everything is emotional. So anything logical when things are emotional becomes very sensible, and therefore that's why a lot of more logically based people latch onto those patterns and those ideas. And that's exactly what the market maker weaponizes against us. They want you to be emotional, and they know 99% will be emotional. Then that 1% that is logical will be searching the web for Wyckoff patterns and Elliott wave shit and inverse, reverse, upside down, triple axle, head and shoulders patterns. It's all of that stuff. So that's the environment we're in right now. It's insanely polarizing between the technicals and between the emotional stuff. I'm sure many of you agree. Let's check in with ETH, even though I already kind of said my piece on ETH. I feel like it's just mimicking this late 2020 structure. I could go to the 3-day. So just a quick recap: C19 crash, tariff crash, sideways through June, pump through July into August, pump through July into August, stalling out in September, notable correction. Here is November 5th. We've just made it through November 5th, and now this heads up into the December timeframe. Let's see how that goes. So we're going to move on to, and by the way, like what would invalidate this for me is obviously, go to the weekly. Right there for me around 3,200, because I've noticed a relationship with around 3,250, 3,300, 3,200. Once we start showing weakness at that level, that's where we get some major moves for ETH. So right now we have this weekly close coming in at around 3,500. That's not the end of the world to me. And I think if we can get back above that psychological level of 4,000 and close a weekly above 4,000, then this will just feel like a typical back test of a prior resistance. Nothing crazy to say about XRP. We are holding the line. The same kind of nonsense we were dealing with after the liquidation event is kind of the same vibes that we're experiencing right now. One thing is clear though, is that this area of $2.70 was holding as a support, and then we had the liquidation, and then we came up and back tested and got rejected off of that level. That doesn't look good. So that looks really bad for XRP. And I'm just being honest. That doesn't look good for XRP from a technical perspective. But when you consider that we've been trading in this territory now, going on a full year effectively, remember when we were in November of last year and just how sideways and shitty and choppy and crashes coming in and just weird it was until we pivoted. And by the way, it wasn't just XRP that pivoted. It was a lot of projects in that basket. So right now, it's so funny. What's doing this move this year is privacy coins. But this move already happened last year with all the quote unquote ISO coins, the ISOs. So now we're just seeing everything like catch up. It's fucking wild. We're seeing what all HBAR, XLM, XRP did over here. Now, with privacy coins, and in the midst of all of what Bitcoin's done recently, we've seen ETH catch up, Solana, and Binance token catch up. Even Tron, there's a couple of others that have just been like silently in the background catching up to Bitcoin. But of course, now we're seeing a explosive move up in another basket of projects. That's how a lot of this stuff unfolds. So I think we're heading up for one more move with XRP very soon, but it's going to be after Bitcoin re-enters price discovery, because that will be a confidence play. Lately, every time Bitcoin makes a little bit higher high, it's not confident enough. It's always kind of feeling like it's on the verge, but then it gets pulled back. So the market makers using Bitcoin right now to just keep this like yo-yo going up and down, keeping a lot of people confused. Because remember, confusion and time capitulation are other tools that the market maker uses against us. Not being patient enough, not being calm and zen and stoic enough, etc. So let's move on to our altcoins and wrap up today's podcast, starting with Alchemy Pay. I have the full chart here. I am not sure if I've covered this in the past, but what we're gonna do is mark off a couple of the horizontal levels that are of interest for me. So this is how I like to do TA and teach TA, especially to new people. And I'm gonna keep this super simple and show you that we have an upper resistance level, and then we have a area that I do want to mark off as a support, regardless of the fact that there's not like a ton of touch points. But what I'm seeing is the selling climax at the end of 2022, followed by the automatic rally. We had our liquidation event back testing that. So for me, this is a spring, and I'm going to show you. In crypto, you can have this where like your springs come in on a rising support line. So like that. Now, guys, what this can do in 30 days is 450%. So a lot of people that go, oh, well, that can't recover. Dude, look, this was a way worse crash, and this was a violent recovery too, to the same levels. So that's why I'm keeping them just in my eyes to make things simple with a couple of key lines, not getting too crazy. Now here is where we have problems with this project, right? Because every time it gets up to this zone, it gets rejected. And that makes sense, because after your buying climax, after your top, that is what you had a problem with. So this area is everything for ACH. And that means I'm going to draw a fib. This is probably the 0.5. It's a little, okay, it's perfectly the bottom of the golden pocket. Okay, that's fair. So if we clear this level, 4 cents on a weekly close, this thing can literally go back to 9 cents rapidly. And from where we are now up to 9 cents, we're looking at a 500% play. And obviously it's safer to play around the 702. That's the typical zone. And you can see if you were waiting, see my issue, and this isn't to throw jabs at anyone because I know somebody's going to call me out on this, but like when you only pay attention to the 702, you get fucked over a lot. Okay. So don't be greedy. That's not how I teach fibs. 702 works and all, but when we're talking the zone here, it could go up to the 888 easily. This is a Fibonacci level I've been using since I started here. But waiting perfectly for that level can get you destroyed. So you can always meet halfway between the 618 and the 0.5 fib to be the most conservative, especially after you draw your horizontal lines. So if I had these horizontal lines drawn and I already saw that I got a rejection twice at the same level that the bear market started at, it could have told me where to safely put my exits, so that anywhere you bought in this bear market, you could have gotten a pretty nice move if you're the type of person that needs the money. Because again, some people are in this and they want to wait for crazy alt season vibes, and some people just want to get in and out of markets, you know? So I'm just trying to be the voice for everybody here. It's not something I would personally do with a project like this, but I'm letting you know these are the skills that you can take away from this red pill and apply to your own investment thesis or trading plan strategy, etc. If you would like, not financial advice, of course. So keep that in mind, this level right here, because when you drop below these levels, it quickly gets bought back up. And we've seen it every single time with this project. Now, the only difference would be here, but this is a fresh project, and we know when it dug really deep like this, isn't it hilarious that if you zoom in, it was right there that this entered a 2 week. Oh my God. This is like 2 weeks, bro. It went up a it went up 11, 12 fucking thousand% in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You see how shitty it needs to get before it gets insane? So if everything's feeling like that right now, that's the vibe. I'm not saying it's coming next week. I'm not saying it's exactly going to go like that, but like it can swipe through all of this liquidity in a week. Okay? That's altcoins. Let's move on to, and by the way, I'm not personally interested in this project. I don't love charts that look like this. Sometimes I do. It depends if they have enough prior chart history or if I know enough about them. I've done enough research to gamble. One of the two couple projects that I've been personally considering is SEI and Virtuals. But I'll let you guys know if I end up making some moves. All right, IMX. This was a project that I had, and I believe I let go of it and rotated out of it to build other positions. So I'm not sure what I have going on with IMX anymore, but it is now down near effectively the bear market lows from December 2022. That right there shows you how Bitcoin is still Papa, still reigning supreme. So we had this channel running for some time, and then finally we broke back down to the bottom. And even this W pattern was a failed breakout. So there's nothing bullish about this chart at all. So there we are. It's like there's just nothing. It's pretty much doing what a lot of bad charts do. They had a luck of being put into the market at the right time, right place, right time. And even the last chart, Alchemy Pay, is a great example of that. And since they've just been getting weaker and weaker and weaker, I mean, right here we have a high. Whoop. We have a lower high. We have a lower high. A retest with a lower low, another lower low on the liquidity, on the liquidation event. This is all weakness. And I'm in projects that look like this too, guys. I mean, I left this project because I was having the same problem. So right here in the golden pocket was a lesson learned. You want to get into things during the bear market, obviously, and you want to start considering taking profits in golden pocket territory, because we saw this happen with a lot of plays. And again, lesson learned. Their major moves happened a lot quicker than anticipated. I mean, this was back in 2024. Also had to do with the eclipses. So very fascinating how ETH has come back up to this territory. We've seen Binance push up to this territory, but this thing is just going perpetually lower. And there's a lot of other projects that's the same. That's the same. Even XRP is somewhere up here, matching its 2017 peak, or the last major cycle peak. This thing again is very weak. So I would personally just say keep an eye out for the 702 to 786. Let's call it $2 to $3 on this IMX play. I am not super convinced that it's going to have a major move higher. We would need to see a lot of things change in this market. For now, these are de-risking zones. And the 888 is a great de-risking zone as well. Here, let me take... It likes to chop around this zone. We just saw this kind of thing happen with ETH, where it kicked back to a very important trend line. This isn't the most important trend line, the green one is, because the green was your bear market bottom before your automatic rally, and then again trying to hold it before breakdown. So the outside of this trend line is of interest for me, around $2. That would be the worst thing to happen for like an alt season concept where it could only get back to a level that it was once rejected at, which aligns with a technical level of the bottom of the golden pocket, which also aligns with an area where you were once holding support. So that's 3 problems with this $2 area coming up into Q1 of 2026. I hope you guys got value out of that little TA Yoda. All right, so Decentraland. I remember this one had an amazing bull run last cycle. Now it's no longer the case, obviously, but this was unbelievable, almost 10,000%. It lost a lot of its value into January. Similar to the first project I looked at, we have a clear trend line, horizontal line of importance around 80 cents. So you can see a little bit of action over there before the final push up, but then we came straight back to that level. Then when we broke below it, it's been the bear market since, because we got rejected once, we got rejected twice, we got rejected 3 times. Then now it's even gotten weaker on the lows because you have low, lower low, lower low, lower low, and that liquidation event was a lower low. So this is just perpetually trading to the downside. And now it's back testing the major moves of 2018 cycle. So this is cool that it had a 2017 cycle and then it did better in 2018. Remember, XRP didn't do this. XRP only got up to like here. It had a lower high. But this project actually went higher, and not only a little bit higher, like much higher. This might have even done better than Ethereum if you bought the top. Oh yeah. So if you bought the top of Mana in 2018, or sorry, yeah, the beginning of 2018, you still would have been able to get a multi-1,000% play in 2 different moments of this bull run. But since it's been very weak and it's now back into the same zone that it was topping at back then, in a way that's kind of strength, right? Because effectively you were continuously coming back to an area that you don't really have too much trading volume built in. You can see right here, we just smashed through that whole zone. Now we're filling it out. So in a way that's really good. But it's just hard to entertain how this will go in the end of the cycle for the current market we're in. Okay, we have launch, we have the C19 crash, and we have this fucking apocalypse that we're in right now. So this is interesting, right? That we're having this long-term support trend line. I'm thinking that this can break. This 80-cent level could break. It's been enough tests and rejections. Getting back to the golden pocket here into the 702 around $2 would be like a gift in my opinion, and that's about 750%. So keep that in mind. I think $2 is possible for Mana. Not gonna say it'll last long though, but I do, because it's just all about this level right here at 80 cents. Once that's broken, this can rapidly move up to $2. And I'm saying like it could be a move like this right here, which is really, really fast. Could take some time to develop though. Look at where we were in November of 2020. By the way, guys, remember I was showing you the Ethereum chart. This is December 21st for Mana. ETH was already breaking out and much, much higher, while this thing was still 71% down from all-time highs. Right over here, Bitcoin was already making new highs. It was pushing into price discovery, but this thing was 70% down from its prior market cycle top. I hope that helps you understand like how bad altcoins can look while Bitcoin's looking really amazing at that final stage of the cycle. And you'll know you're in the final stage of the cycle because you're seeing 1,000% moves in some cases. just very hard to call it right now with the way we're looking, you know? But of course, we will update as things progress. Final, we have Beam. Oof. Okay. So Beam did the thing that is kind of anticipated here with a chart that is very, very new. We're filling out the area that we didn't have any time trading within. So you see here, we pushed up and we built all of this zone. So you have from here to here, somewhat filled out. But then once you broke below there, you start filling out the bottom from where it launched. And that's what we're dealing with here. So now we're knowing that this is kind of figuring out what it is, what's fair value, but it's in price discovery to the downside. Okay. So one thing I can do though, I'm pretty confident you can have a total fib pull, and that orange line is perfectly on the 702. So that's kind of like the area of interest to de-risk. Not the craziest play on earth, but again, hoping for these things to go into price discovery is very, yeah, it's a Hail Mary pass. They can make crazy moves though, because you see from October 2023 up to here, it had a 1000% move in 140 days. But the same it did in reverse. It lost 90% of its value just as rapidly as it gained its value. So that's kind of what we're working with here, like a major M pattern breakdown, and then now we're just filling out this area between 0.003 and 1 penny. So very weak looking and very interesting. All of this week's charts are looking more on the weaker side, and it is kind of in these moments where things are very, very weak right before we pivot. So we've examined a couple of charts here today which are showing that they have a much different vibe than what ETH is doing, what XRP is doing, and what Bitcoin is doing, obviously. And I know there's some outliers currently that are really overvalued. Some RSIs already at like 95 on some random privacy coins breaking out. And this is kind of like that shift moment where we can see that Bitcoin holding sideways and holding support is actually insanely beneficial for altcoins, given that we get some positive, confident, quote unquote, news in the exoteric to make all of the FOMO start kicking in. So we're right there. We're heading into that 47th week in the year next week, not the upcoming week that we're moving into. And we have the 47 days left in the year during this week that we're moving into. So a couple of those big 47 codes. And of course, I will be sharing a mid-market update with you guys very, very soon. Appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. Much love.